and welcome to Higher Density Living. I love doing the high because it sounds so interesting in the mic. I was trying to take your breath away the other day.
That's right. Jason, every time I see you on the street, you take my breath away.
No, I was like, we had the mics so hot. At our other studio, we have a new studio for Higher Density Living.
Lava?
If they hear our privilege, they'll know why we're our last privilege
exactly.
episode. They'll know exactly why we're in this new studio.
But we got a nice, hot new studio though.
Yeah, it's hot.
Studio lighting,
literally
tables, boards, mics,
green screen.
green screen. What is this?
Like,
Hollywood.
yeah, we have moved up in the neck of the woods. We had somebody just try to come in and attack us.
And then we told
no,
them.
it was a privileged man.
It was a privileged man, and we told the privileged man no.
And so, real quick, we are going to be talking about something today in our
Interesting
episode
concept, yeah.
that is, well, I don't know if it's going to be interesting. Maybe for geeks like us,
Well, it
but
depends.
some people may. Real quick, when I say real quick.
Real
here's-
quick, 45 minutes later.
No, Alex, you just purchased something because I heard Amanda complaining the other day that you purchased it on the sly with a credit card or something. So this goes right into the, you guys are drinking mimosas and eating vegan pizza.
Yeah.
And you purchased a copper pyramid to meditate into.
Yeah, I did.
And pyramids, shapes, power.
Power?
That's what we're going to be talking about.
I do like the sound power.
Not just pyramids, not pyramid power.
No.
We're going to be talking about shape power.
All
And if you
shapes.
notice in our new studio, we have a circular table
Yeah.
that I put up here that was intentional.
Much better energy.
Yes. So that's all what we're going to be talking about, right?
Yeah, that's
It's like the little blocks when we played as little kids.
yeah,
Those-
Legos.
Did
were
you have the
wrong.
wooden blocks? You know what my favorite were? The Lincoln Logs.
Lincoln Logs were
With
a
that
blast.
big cardboard with the metal, had the metal top and the metal bottom.
I got to tell you, it wasn't the fact of building them. It was the smell when I opened up the container of the cedar blocks.
Yes.
I think
love
that's
that.
what got me.
Yeah, it was like Frontier and you had the little plastic.
I felt like a
Can you even play
I felt like my
Indians and Cowboys anymore?
no. I feel like my clothing went plaid all of a sudden, and I grew a beard.
Yes.
And an axe showed up in my hand every time I opened up my Lincoln Log box.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I played with those or G.I. Joes. It's so funny when we were little, all the things that.
Anytime I smell cedar. But we're building though, right?
Yes, yeah.
And there's an interesting fact about that, so I'm glad you said that. When
I
you
wonder
build,
why I wonder why you're attracted to cedar so much.
I don't
The smell.
something about
I
the
like
smell.
the I need to get some. I'm gonna see if I can find some today. I like the seed. I like wood essential oil smells.
Ooh.
Like like hickory, or
Mahogany,
oak,
birch,
yeah, just
yew.
smelling. Like if you, what was that show where you're from? In
What?
the barns, where the guy goes in the barn. And he's been on PBS for like 250 years. I mean, when they first
Antiques
came out with
Roadshow?
cameras.
What?
No, it wasn't. It was Norm or something like that. And he was a woodworker dude in Massachusetts.
Oh.
He had an accent. Remember him? Kind of a bigger, burly dude.
Oh.
Yes.
This
You know what
Saturday,
I'm talking about.
I think Saturday mornings they would
Yes,
actually air
yes,
his
yeah,
show, and
yeah,
he'd be
I
like,
think it's
"I'm going to
Norm.
construct
And he
this."
had like a cool Massachusetts barn.
Yeah.
Or New England barn, and he would go in there, and I just always, when I watched it as a kid, I would always imagine the smells in there, in like a woodworking
Something
place.
about like a wood shop just smells great.
Oh yeah,
Like
so freaking manly.
I can't stand shopping in Home Depot or Lowe's because their customer service is terrible. But man, does it smell good?
Oh, it's delicious when you go to the lumber section.
Oh, you're just like, okay, you know what? I'll
Yeah.
give him a pass this time.
Yeah, I like to wear tool belts when I walk through, like leather chaps and a tool belt. It's better to wear a tool. Well, you don't want to just wear your tool belt at
They're
night
like,
in bed.
Who is this guy?
Yeah, it's like who's the guy off of Queen? They made the movie here.
Which
recently.
one?
The
lead guy?
the lead singer.
He wears tool belts to bed.
Oh, I bet he did. I saw that movie. Dude, I love his mustache.
His mustache. That mustache.
What was his name?
on
Fred?
point.
Everybody's going to be
Freddie
screaming
Mercury.
at us. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, no one's screaming at us. No
Yeah.
screaming.
I guarantee you there's comments.
I want no screaming. All right. So quick story, right?
So getting back into
So,
shapes.
well, hold on. Let's get back into shapes. But you talked about Lincoln Logs.
This is resonating with you.
Yeah, the Lincoln Logs are. Well, when you're a child or you're young, you just got a pile of logs.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to come to some sort of consensus or understanding or
Oh, shit.
visualization within your mind
Right.
to understand, how do I want these lines or vertices to take form? Do I want them in parallel? Do I want them to come to a point? Do I want it to be circular? How do I want them to support one another? So what you're doing is you create first with the mind the shape,
Right.
and then you manifest that shape in the actual physical material. Interesting. And it holds structure. So your thought is now holding structure within space. That means it has to have some sort of energy to it, some sort of field that is affording the opportunity of those Lincoln logs to stay in place through friction and other physical things like that, and the actual nuclear bond of the thing that makes up the cedar log. Those have to stay there. That's got to be there, right? So the thought has now led to the point of the structure and stabilization of this form in space. So, and you made a joke. I mean, I did. I bought a copper meditation pyramid, a big one, Giza style.
No, I wasn't making a joke. I'm
sick.
kind of like pyramid envious of you.
Yeah, it's just this pyramid envy.
Yeah.
It's a new
pyramid.
thing.
Yeah, it's a new thing.
It's not
copper, too.
It's no longer penis envy. It's pyramid envy.
Pyramid envy, yes.
And it's got a tip on it. Huge one.
Oh, really?
Yeah, big capstone.
Yeah, this is so
I'm talking about the pyramid,
Freudian.
Jason.
Oh, yeah, you're from that. Speaking of privilege, you'd have a capstone on your penis. Being from the founding forefathers.
Yeah, the founding forefathers.
I mean, people don't realize this, but literally where you were raised is a walk or a stone's throw to
literally
Plymouth
a
Rock.
stone's throw.
To Plymouth Rock.
Yeah.
You were like right there.
Like I hit a rock with a rock. It's insane.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Like William Bradford, the guy who was
Yes.
the governor or leading the Mayflower or whatever. Now I'm sidetracked. So if we're looking at this pyramid, right? She's like, why would you spend that money on that pyramid? That seems like such an obtuse, way to use your funds. But she knows me pretty well, and then she knows I always have some sort of explanation backed up. Or like she likes to say, she told me last night, "You're always right." Trust me, it wasn't a compliment.
No, I don't think. So it was the reverse compliment.
It was, yeah, there's backhanded compliment.
Yeah, it was like, you're always right, huh?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, in my own mind, I am.
So there's a lot that goes into this pyramid, right? And it's open. Like air can move through it. You can walk right into it. It's just the skeletal structure of it. Okay, I have my vertices all lining up to one point at 51.6 degrees at a 6-foot base. Same shape as Giza. And before we get into it, I had purchased this because there's a power, there's a change that happens when you sit inside of it. It can actually enhance your meditations, right? It can change the cellular activity of your body. It can heal certain things, prolong the life of certain objects, food, right? It can prevent the growth of certain types of bacteria that could harm you. So how do we even figure that stuff out? So before I even got into my own pyramid, right, we have to look at the history of it. And if we look at someone that actually had quite a bit of study, and you were talking in a Russian accent earlier when we were talking about shape power.
Yes, I was. Yeah, I was, because I was wanting it to go more. When we think of like physics, or we think of this ability to be able to look at an object, especially something that we create, because that's what, when we look at architecture, we're looking at. I mean, when you look at downtown Manhattan,
Yeah.
that was created by Rockefellers, and
Sure. What if they don't know shit about like how things should be shaped?
because of what we had, and I think, what was it, early 1800s, late 1800s, around there, when we've had the shift of science, and we almost threw out the baby with the bathwater, no pun intended, when we started looking at, instead of looking at science and seeing, let's talk about like ghost or reincarnation or heaven, hell, the Bible, when we started looking, anything that had this unexplained,
And non-physical.
right, we turned around and said, we just put it all in a big trash bag,
Yeah.
and said, we're done. And then we said, man can create. And then we became this big egotistical Freudian being. And then we created these monster penis skyscrapers. We even brought
Massive phallic
from
skyscrapers.
Egypt. A lot of people don't realize this, but how many obelisks did we bring from?
So
the
many.
Masons
If
brought
you
them. There's
go
one
to
in Central Park.
Central Park, yeah. It's this big sandstone one right outside of the
It
mall.
was like 800 tons or something,
the
and they had to put it on.
museum of whatever it is.
Yeah, and then you have one in Washington, D.C., So, you had all these egotistical, high-rise type philosophies of badder, bigger, better, more.
You're
money.
a better person if you're closer to God, right?
Yes,
So you got to
yeah.
get the top office at the very top in the
Mhm.
corner, and
Right.
you can overlook everyone underneath
Well,
you.
Monopoly, yeah, Park Place,
Right.
Boardwalk,
Isn't that what it is?
escape jail.
It's just, another idea of just being above people.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's not really conducive to what shapes are supposed to be, right? And I joked, you were in the Russian accent. Well, if we look at people who've done quite an extensive amount of research and investment into this, there was a Ukrainian gentleman named Alexander Golod, and he was a defense contractor for a very long time. And through his study and work in the Soviet Union, he realized that there was something going on with the actual etheric energy of the earth, the electrostatic energy of the earth, when they would have certain shapes that they were building, right? When they were using very sensitive instruments, and through the measurements of these defense items, we'll call that, whatever it might be for, they realized that the structure of certain things they were designing were giving off a change in the magnetic field and electrostatic energy of the earth, an anomaly. And depending on how that shape was, would determine the strength of that field. So Alexander Golod went around and he started building pyramids all over the Soviet Union. And he started doing this, late 80s, early 1990s.
Mm-hmm.
And these things were everywhere. And what he was doing was he started to understand that there were large statistical changes that should not have been likely when a pyramid was put in a certain geographic place. So he saw that there were decreases in violent weather, so you had weather stabilization. He saw that the actual growth of crops within that area, within a certain field of the pyramid that was built, would actually have a larger yield. But you have a weather stabilization, right? So it'd be like less rain. It was just something about the energy of the pyramid itself, right? And they also said that the ozone layer actually healed directly over that when they were doing their measurements. So right over the actual apex of the shape. And through his study, he found that with a certain angle, he was building these fiberglass pyramids all over Russia and Eastern Europe. And you can see them. You can still go there now. They have them set up all over the place. And through these studies, they would do all of these different nuances where he would put water inside of the pyramid, and the water would, I guess, energetically structure itself, and they would take that and give that water to prisoners within the local penitentiaries, and would actually decrease violent crime within the penitentiaries by like a significant, standard deviation.
Oh yeah, I mean we know we did a part of our episode on structured water.
Right, on structured water. But what he was doing is he's like, well, how is it that the pyramid is actually structuring the water? So something must be going on inside of the pyramid itself that is changing the electrostatic and magnetic structure that would affect the actual molecules in the water to get it to act a certain way.
Well, I mean, just like a radio antenna.
Funny you said that, because
it's going to be the same. Can shapes collect and transmit?
Correct. Much like when you're looking at a circuit board, right, or a hard drive.
Right. So
you have
the energy in geometric patterns display
have the ability to receive, store, and emit information. Right? They have a change. They create some sort of field. How do you think you save things on the hard drive of this recording?
Mm-hmm.
So they were using these military radar units, and the measurements had indicated large amounts of ionizing radiation coming from the tips of these pyramids. And they're like, how in all things, possible is this like even occurring? How can something, just a static object, strictly out of its shape alone, create such an ionized, radiological field coming out of its apex in a very defined area, a very structured area? And that's when the research really took off. And right now, there's still 17 very large fiberglass pyramids still left over, much of Russia.
Mm-hmm.
And they found that Golod realized that there were very conducive materials that they have that work best for it. And they were wood, copper, wire, PVC, and fiberglass. And those blends, however you did it, with the appropriate angle that he had designed, I believe he patented it, from that would create the most dramatic effects. And they would put food inside these pyramids. People went there to sit and become healthy and, cure certain diseases that they might have. It's the typical sounding like, wait a minute, what the hell's going on here? Like, oh, we found like the antidote to everything. But it was interesting through these statistical studies and the health anomalies that were happening and the longevity of items underneath and outside of it in a radius of the size of the pyramid proportional to its size had large positive effects to everyone, everything, and everything underneath that pyramid itself. So it completely took off, and people still, I guess in Russia, I would call it like a pilgrimage to one of the largest pyramid sites. And they just hang out inside. They have meditation groups, and they do all these interesting things.
Well, I think it's real interesting. In one of the books that we're talking about, we have on the Higher Density Living website. Why don't you share that real quick?
Oh, Dan A. Davidson. Dan wrote, he was a physicist, and he did a phenomenal book on the power of shapes. Book was called Shape Power. And Dan specialized in using oscilloscopes, very sensitive ones, certain electrical circuits, and mediums. So he would apply the physical readings he would receive from his very sensitive machines, right, from a scientific standpoint, and then he would also compare that with the clairvoyant readings, right, that some sort of medium or person who could sense emotion, at a distance, like essentially remote viewing or using their consciousness to observe what is actually happening within the energy of the pyramid, and then comparing that data against itself. So like you said, remember how we said, our philosophy, we left all that stuff behind, right? We didn't want to focus on it. What he did is he took his background in physics and these highly sensitive instruments that he used to build and design and what have you, and he blended that with that other side that people have long forgotten. And then he took the data from both to see if it came together to some sort of consensus, to see if maybe there's a joining of the data from what these people are sensing to what the actual, inanimate instrument might be sensing.
So it's a joining of physics with metaphysics.
That's exactly right. And so he wrote this phenomenal book on it called Shape Power. It's very expensive to buy the book. So your best bet is to just go get the PDF right on our website. And, scroll
and then go to
it.
higherdensityliving.com and then go under
books.
Books.
And you'll see it right there. You can't miss it. So the largest contention of the book in its main theme is that we have been building structures over time. Architecture, like you were talking about New York City, these huge phallic pieces, square buildings, things that are frankly not sturdy, with disregard for anything beyond the shape itself. So an architect would build something just for the shape, just for the look.
Right.
But not for the idea of the energy or the changes in the atmosphere of the environment. Right. It was strictly aesthetic, not the actual effects that it was having beyond the design and shape of it itself.
But they didn't realize in putting these, as we saw in 9/11, as horrific as that was, why would they target a large building in New York City?
There's a lot of energy in that building.
Yeah, there was a lot of energy in that building, but you can also see that is what we derive our strength and power from.
Right, our strength and power is from something tall and large.
The World
right?
Trade Center, yeah.
That's exactly right. And frankly, the shape was not conducive to the name. One bit.
No, not
There's
at all.
no worldly power to it. If anything, once we dig into this, the power of that building, its actual etheric power, was not cohesive with its, what the universe says is actually powerful.
The only powerful building in the United States is the Trump Tower. Gold. Yes, exactly. Gold. We have lots of gold.
Yeah, lots of gold.
It's got to be reflects and looks back at, and the gold reflection only shows your ego back to it.
Yeah, show me how good I look. How vain can I be when I walk inside?
I need some gold. What was that? I've been to some of those. It's so funny. You go to California, you look at some of these large mansions,
yeah,
and you see all the gold gilding, and it's just where, and then where you're from, these huge intricate moldings.
Oh, the crown moldings and everything.
Yeah, it's just it's beautiful, but it's necessary.
No,
for the evolution of our higher conscious.
Well, from what we're going to learn in this episode, is that it's not conducive to the energy of the room. It's structure. It's actually doing you harm.
But I want people to understand this in not just a building format, because in the book it talks about this, and I want you to go into this a little bit more. I think speakers give the best show of what can actually scientifically demonstrate. So when you look at a speaker and you put sound to it,
Mm.
you know, electricity or whatever, has a big magnet. I mean,
Yeah.
where they have a subwoofer or whatever. And then from there, you put a oscilloscope to it. I know that there was a John Keeley,
John Keeley, that's right.
and he had like vibrating wave plates.
Yeah.
And I've seen that even on YouTube. You can type that in and see it develop patterns off of frequencies.
Right, they put sand on top of the plate, so depending on the frequency,
Right.
determines
It'll
the
create
shape.
these beautiful patterns.
Mm.
So that's showing something. It's like, why is that pattern forming?
Why is that pattern forming?
Why is an oscilloscope, when I put it into a speaker and then start putting frequency through that magnet, what's happening?
Yeah, what is happening? You're trying to register that shape in what I would call two-dimensional format, right? It's not three-dimensional. You're trying to understand.
But are we looking? We're not looking at shapes in 3 dimensions, though, are we?
No, we're not. You're looking at it in 2 dimensions. But if you expand those shapes you see on the speaker into 3 dimensions, you see that those are natural shapes that are accustomed to the actual sound of the universe itself.
But and he talks about it being like a 3-dimensional wave structure,
Mm-hmm.
and it's static or dynamic. So why is it when I walk into a building, it feels eerie, and then you can have 10 other people say the same thing about the building, or one room?
Yeah.
I mean, paranormal, whatever. But it's like, whether it's baggage from people dying in there, we always use this, but we never think of it. We always think of it in that format. So I'm like, oh, that's just
So this is a jump here, okay? There's conscious energy that happened within that shape.
right.
There's people in this building thinking, having these ideas. So there's an impression of this energy, a vibrational frequency.
Mm.
And so if that frequency is in a place that's already non-conducive for holding and manipulating and changing it and softening that energy,
Right.
it's going to sit there in that chaotic, ugly form that's going to make you feel not at ease.
Could you imagine what the IRS building feels like?
Oh,
Oh, that's the worst. That's probably like a wormhole there.
I'm glad you want to. I would be interested to know what the health effects, I might have to use Tartle for that, but the health effects of IRS workers over time.
It's got to be not good.
No, they got to be not good,
Because what I mean, and this is very important because he talks about this in a study like geometric mandalas.
Yeah, the mandalas,
And
right?
they've proven that they can focus you. Like you can focus your mind. It opens your conscious. That's proven. And that's just a 2-dimensional form.
That's that focus intention on the 2-dimensional form. And then it goes into a yantra
Right.
when you move it into a 3-dimensional form. Is that correct?
Right.
Is that what the book
it does.
says?
Yep.
So, and that's
It's
what
like
we're
a
looking at.
vocalized spatial pattern called
Correct.
the mantra. Or the
Because if shape is representative of sound,
mantra.
work yourself backwards here.
Oh, no, this is good.
Okay.
This is very important,
So if
everyone.
shape is representative of sound, in 3 dimensions, that sound moved into 2 dimensions is a shape, a pyramid, a mandala, whatever that thing might be.
Yes.
So a building or a structure or any other geometrical thing is going to vibrate and carry some sort of frequency or sound associated with it, dependent on its design.
It's going to be an energetic structure.
It has to be an energetic structure. By definition, as above, so below, mandalas to yantras or mantras, whatever you want to call it, that's what's happening.
So is that why, like, societies throughout with religion, they've always used shapes or, objects or, like in Moses and time frame, when he had a stick and he threw it down and it turned into a snake.
It turns into
in
a
front
snake,
of
right?
Pharaoh, and
Or you start looking at why is it, in certain hieroglyphs they have that spiral pattern,
Mhm.
right? Much like a Fibonacci kind of setup. Or if you look at the shape that Mary Magdalene had, I'm trying to remember. From that shape, it carries sort of a structure to it. But why was it so important that it's drawn a certain way? Or why is it when you're doing certain calligraphy work, if you're writing, certain Mandarin characters, why is it that there's a certain pattern to how you're supposed to draw these characters out? Because they contain an energy within themselves.
But it's more than just an instructor, and I want you to get into this a little bit. And you alluded to this, but it's a pathway.
It is a pathway.
Thus your pyramid that you're putting in your house.
That's the pyramid, right? So what I'm doing is a more refined bridge of thought. So having a shape that is representative of the thought or idea that I am trying to embody only strengthens and magnifies that thought or idea. And that's seen with ionizing radiation, the electrostatic energy, the nuclear reactions that are happening between certain atoms as vertices come to a certain point. So what it's saying is, if I have, it's called the Lagrange, I think the Lagrange effect. Now, what happens is, if you have two parallel fields of some sort of material or atoms, that they have a perpendicular force that coming off of that field, and the interaction between these two parallels of these field creates a circular motion, something that spins.
Right.
And everything spins in the universe. Planets spin, galaxies spin, sun spins, Earth spins, right? Atoms spin, all these things. So what they do is this field, this small nuclear gravitic field is actually moving energy in a spiral pattern. And then that pattern moves, they found that it moves vertically in between these points. So now you have a translational flow of this energy. So what they realized, that if we can take this field of energy, this aether, this chi, this 0 point, some people like to call it, and we can find a shape that's most conducive for it to trap it into a certain direction, then you're going to have a highly focused area or energetic point. And that's what we want to be creating. That's how we should be building and thinking and working with.
And I want to get into that, what like an ideal, not right now, but because I want us, I feel like we're building a really good foundation. But there was, in the book it talks about, and maybe you can pronounce this better, because it's Incunabula, and I didn't want to pronounce it, Incunabulu files.
Incunabulu files?
Yes.
That sounds terrible.
I know it does. But here's what the book says. Under the premise that there are an infinite number of other worlds coexisting with us, but slightly out of phase.
Yes.
So we know that. Physics is trying to play with that, with string theory and all this stuff that's going on.
Right, they're saying there's 12 other dimensions that
we already
work
know
with.
that. That's been proven.
Right.
We don't know how many dimensions. We're still figuring that out, what's happening in the dimensions. Can we go in and out of them? It's Stargate and all that stuff. But we know that that's not pseudoscience. That's true science.
Right. And what they're saying in the book is that all of these dimensions actually permeate each other all at once.
Right.
And that's the thing that's missed.
But in this is really cool. You've got to listen to this. This is amazing. So a device was created that used a sensory deprivation tank, a television screen to project a two-dimensional pattern, and a solenoid-wired helmet to send out a three-dimensional electromagnetic pattern resonating to the two-dimensional image.
Okay.
The Incunabula files indicated that the mandala or mantra for 5 alternate Earths had been found, and that a subject could be physically shifted to another reality simply by being exposed simultaneously to the 2D and the 3D map for that location. So
well, it makes sense. What they're doing is they're trying to put a consciousness imprint, right? So your consciousness sits inside of this all-pervasive medium. This, like, they look at it as almost like a superfluid.
Right.
And your consciousness moves through it in thought. Remember we talked about very first episode, consciousness is non-local. It can move wherever it wants to go.
Yeah, it's not concerned that it's in whatever dimension
Right.
or density.
And
it doesn't.
And then we had our thing on dreams. So if your
Right.
consciousness is creating this imagery, showing you this other place. So if someone is forcing a pattern, an electrical pattern, a signal of this other place, this other reality, you would be able to see that other
is getting
reality
good now,
with that
Alex.
consciousness. Are you feeling that?
No, I'm understanding this now.
Right. So if you're in that sensory deprivation tank and that's the only signal you're receiving, that's the one that you're going to project. That's the
Right.
one you're going to see in that mind's eye.
So there was a guy by the name of Tom Beardens,
Tom Beardens.
and he has tupoids, TULPOIDS, which are entities from alternate realities. Under the right condition, these entities can shift from their reality to ours, even leaving physical traces while here.
Right.
And so the technique involves charging it into an energy level that matches the target reality, then presenting the mandala mantra images to enable the shift. Once the energy level of the alien entity returned to its natural energy state, it would shift back to its home reality. So the point that's what he says, the point that Bearden is making is that all possible worlds and creations exist. Even, this is really cool, even on mental levels. So by producing a sustained pattern, you actually create that reality somewhere in the omniverse using shape power. It might be possible to shift that desired micro-reality into our own.
Precise, isn't it? That's exactly what we're
That's
saying.
what the Egyptians were doing.
That's what I was doing with Madame Lincoln logs. I had a desire to build a shape
Right,
that I saw in my mind first.
right.
And the most physical, straightforward aspect of it, that's what I created. I created that shape out of it. I created an own micro universe within itself. And that's what I'm looking at through my own imagination. And yes, the Egyptians were doing it. Yes, everyone was doing it. But the point, and what's cool about him is, Dan Davidson, is that he's blending this other side, these people talking about these other realities, with what physics currently understands. And that blend, and saying that there's that superfluid, that energetic medium is just depending on how you charge yourself to move in and out of phase to shift yourself to that other place.
Well, and Dr. Thelma Moss at UCLA.
Yeah.
So we're getting back into what people be like, okay, we're
back, we're grounded.
He mentioned the word alien. Determined that brainwave patterns for various emotional and physical states, and that these patterns recorded on a chart recorder in 2 dimensions, but can be projected into a subject to produce a desired effect.
Yes.
So the projected pattern is again 3-dimensional and thus a structured shape.
Okay. Again, remember how you and I always talk about there's a vibrational frequency to what we think, feel, act, and do. Mm-hmm. Everything about it. So once you record that and you send that direct signal back into a person, they can have that feeling again totally unprovoked through their own doing.
Yes.
You can then artificially provoke that feeling. And that's an interesting thing that you'd have to look at.
Somebody's eating lunch.
Yeah, I can smell the lunch. I can smell the meat. You know what I mean? But beyond that, how does that move into the shape? So the shape, this idea, so how do we focus, right? That idea or that thought or that vibrational energy to a specific point. And Alexander Golod understood that. That's what his pyramids are doing. Ionizing radiation, electrostatic field changes, right? Changes in the magnetism of the local area. That's what was happening with that shape.
I wonder when these like old school masons brought over these Egyptian artifacts.
Well, I guess it begs the question.
Like if they had a different
understanding for why they were.
Because I mean, that's who did it. That's who funded it all. If you do it, that's not a conspiracy theory.
No, you look back; those are the guys who were funding it.
So there had to be something that they knew.
Yeah.
Or a thought process of, if we put these obelisks, because they're like radio frequency towers, I would imagine ancient.
Are they not? Yeah, they're the same damn thing as silicon dioxide crystal would be doing.
Yeah.
Inside your computer.
So, and to put one in, and there's a map that shows them all. They're all over the United States. They put it, especially on the East Coast.
Look at the weather on that map. Yeah. If you actually go back and look at the historical weather of that specific area, the microclimate, you'll see that the microclimates around those shapes have been more stable than all the surrounding areas.
That's interesting.
So if you don't want to get rained on in D.C., go stand by the obelisk.
But this is what I thought was interesting. That's going to blow your mind, Alex. Yeah. And you already know this, but this is amazing. Because your girlfriend said you know everything, right? How did she say it sarcastically?
Because you know everything. You're always right. Because you're always right.
But this is something I'm learning. You've learned it all. But so Dr. Michael Persinger, they did a huge study, and he said that they had found that thoughts occur in the brain as 3-dimensional forms, but then they have to be reduced by instrumentation to 2-dimensional patterns.
Well, that's how we read things.
That's how but think about this. They're in our conscious as 3 dimensions. So when we're dreaming, are we dreaming in 3 dimensions?
Of course you are. You're moving through that world in 3 dimensions. Every aspect of it.
And I don't want to get into sleeping thing because we did that, but I'm learning something this year. And 2020 has become, I even have like Fitbits and all that stuff, and I'm doing my sleep score, trying melatonin, all these different things, because I'm learning how important sleep is.
Yes.
Just be productive during the freaking damn day.
Be productive.
And get your 8-9 hours of sleep, however much you need at night.
Be productive at night.
It heals. Yes, be productive at night, because that world is so important. There's no difference between. It's all reality.
I'm glad you are stating that you've realized the level of importance in that world.
And so when your girlfriend kicks you out of the bed, can you go sleep in your copper pyramid?
Oh, float in it.
I wonder if you get like super bomb sleep in there.
Well, they make
and then bring the dogs in there.
They make larger ones.
I wonder if the dogs will automatically be drawn to sleep in there.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I don't know.
I
will house a study.
Mm-hmm.
I will house a study to see if that actually...
Too bad you don't have the pyramid here now, because your dog's under surgery as we speak. She's getting fixed, right?
She is getting fixed right now.
That would be interesting to stick her in the pyramid and see if she...
heals up in a day.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be great?
But that is interesting to me that we think in 3-dimensional forms.
Yeah, of course.
So that opens it up. If it's in a 3-dimensional form, that reality with our conscious not knowing levels densities, dimensions, all this.
We're doing a disservice to the things we create and the way we analyze our world.
Right. But what's the Egyptian god that was the one of the words of power? And everybody's trying to go into this. It's like Thoth.
Thoth.
Yeah, Thoth.
Yeah.
But that was something where he would talk about the like words. And then I don't want to mess it up. And I know there's people that have studied on this. But
you got it.
wasn't there something
You're
like...
going to make a bridge. Done.
Because, yeah, wasn't there something where he was rewarded? Because, in creation they had that, and then he ended up being the keeper of knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And he was rewarded that. And I don't know the whole story completely. So
In other cultures, he was referred to as Hermes Trismegistus, if I said that
yes,
correctly.
and then there was something with like a scorpion bite and
Okay.
the poison.
But the words are important. I'm glad you said that, because how does a word have shape?
Right. Yes.
I don't know. I'm asking you, does it? Jason, could you make a bridge in your mind from what I have explained? How is it possible that a word could have shape?
Well, no, it's very interesting because words create three-dimension in my thought process.
In your thought process, right?
Right.
So if I were to say some sort of
like
object,
Nicki Minaj.
okay, I just pictured her in 3 dimensions.
That's so awesome. Same here, bro. Isn't that amazing?
But
all the videos I watched over and over again, all up here.
all of Europe in cold storage.
No, we just lost about 67% of our listeners.
Yeah, they just dropped off.
The other dudes that are hanging on, the 12 guys.
They're like, please save this episode. But the point is, so with the word, right? The word creates a vibrational frequency.
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking right now, vibrating a crystal in this microphone, which is being recorded in 2 dimensions, right? Which give us our waveforms. But it also has a 3-dimensional shape to absolutely everything I do and everything that I talk about. So then if you start looking at Thoth and you start saying people say there are power in words.
Right.
Well, you bet your ass there's power in words, because when you're saying something, it carries energy and it carries shape with it. Yeah. And those things are defining the areas and everything that we do in existence. So let's make a big bridge. You ready for this?
Words and building.
Words and building. I'm essentially building consciousness through words, and that will change the atmosphere or the thought, right? The area, the electrostatic energy, this superfluid medium, this 0-point space, this chi, this aether, whatever it might be, can be affected by the words I'm saying.
Well, there was that famous builder in Florida that built the Coral Castle.
The Coral Castle.
And
no one was sure how he did it.
What did he say about words?
No one was sure how he did it.
He said he sang to the stones.
Speaks to them.
And they would move.
Yeah, and move. And there's been...
words of power?
Words of power, certain frequencies, right, for them to move, right?
Could you create, as the book says, a gravity deflection pattern that would lead to levitation?
I don't see any reason why there's nothing that says you couldn't do it.
Shape power.
Yeah. Shape power, exactly.
We should create, you know what I think of when I think of shape power?
What?
We're digressing. I think of like a Jane Fonda aerobics workout. All right, let's do shape power. Here we go. And they got like the pink dumbbells, We're
going to start charging, we're going to be Peloton's competitor with shape power 2.0.
Yeah, it's like shape power.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like cheesy 80 music.
People
like
are just floating around the room. What happened?
That's funny. So I want to get into magnetism, electricity, gravity fluctuations.
Right.
When it comes to... because they talk about voltmeters, ammeters, radionic machines, gravity wave sensors, living organisms, because we have shapes on plants.
We have shapes on plants. Everything carries a shape. Either it's cellular structure, the atomic structure, all of it carries some sort of shape. So that means that shape has to have a defined tone or vibration or resonance to it.
Right.
Okay? And then by altering that resonance is going to change whatever the structure of it might be in a non-physical or a physical format. And the first consideration that they looked at was a line, just one line itself, and that there was power in a line because when you start to put them in parallels, then you're starting to create some sort of field. And then can I contain that field if I'm going to take these lines and then move them to a point? Because the effect of a gradient would increase my electron charge in the magnetic field coming off of the apex. So at the top of an obelisk, you're going to have a higher ionizing radiation field. At the top of a pyramid, the Luxor in Egypt, right? Certain shapes, certain plants, any of these things are going to carry that energy. And what we're doing is we're just trying to refine the natural energy that it has. So if the Earth is circular, right? It's a big, or it's spherical. And it is scalar pushing out all this electromagnetic energy from the core. How do you trap that energy through your own structures on the surface, that field, that magnetic field that the Earth pushes out, and how do you refine that into a focalized point so that it builds a nice coherent structure? It's not chaotic. Because if we're walking around and we have our thoughts in a chaotic structure, and our thoughts don't have a proper shape to them because we're all, confused and like we're focusing on certain things and I've had a bad day, that vibrational frequency is going to erode this ether, this magnetic field that the Earth is actually emanating. So we're like almost like wrecking that field. Like our thoughts, I guess you could say in a sense, would be destroying the ozone. If I were to make that big of a reach, right? So then what you want to do is like, okay, so if everyone's thoughts are non-coherent, then we should build shapes that help refine those thoughts and that electromagnetic, electrostatic atmosphere of the Earth itself.
But we could bring these patterns into a unity condition.
Of course you could.
So you could have a whole city.
Yes.
And it would be vibrating at a level.
That's precisely correct. Then you would change so New York wears me out.
Oh yeah. I think any large city, people you'd love to come to it. It's fun to walk around for a while, and then after so many days, you just start feeling worn out, especially if you're not. And then you go out into nature, and it's just it's
refreshing.
Yes,
because nature is still afforded the natural organic structure. It understands how to take that structure and channel that energy properly. It knows that balance between those parallels of those lines, those nuclear interactions. It understands that all the way down to the structure of the leaf. But when you go to New York, everything's square. Everything's in a grid. The pavement and the concrete you're walking on is crushed rock. So the symmetry that original stone had before is no longer the same. It becomes non-coherent. And it makes you wonder, well, that's why they tell you don't put batteries on concrete. That's why it drains it. Is because the energy's focused in all these different areas. Is not actually helping the life force. It's killing the life force.
But when we look at natural shapes and we look at man-made shapes,
yeah.
And then he talks about this 0-point energy, or ZPE. And we see the beauty of a flower or a seashell. We see the shape of planets, galaxies, the things that telescopes are picking up now.
Right.
Are just amazing.
They all
go down into the deep depths, which is almost like an alien. Some of the things that you can see in the deep ocean is so alien to us, and we're discovering new creatures all the time that are down there that are doing things that amaze us.
Yeah.
Like a lobster that could live forever.
Correct.
Or, the ones that create their own fluorescent lighting.
Yes.
Or they can change like an LED from green to red to blue. There's these things, use the rainbow colors, and most of them can't see in total darkness. When we see these natural shapes, why did man get to the point, and because we only have a few minutes left on this episode, and I want to get more into this on the next one, be like a lot more practical with it.
Economics.
So you think that's these man-made shapes that are negative energy?
Yes.
How did we get to that level as a society that's supposed to be, where we're at today?
Yeah, I know what you're feeling. It's economics, in my point. It was easy use.
But are we looking at it as like cutting costs of materials?
Of course.
Like if we make this square.
If you have less vertices, that's less raw material to build. There's less difficulty in the geometry of the structure by building it in a square. You can frame a square house in probably like 2 seconds.
But when I look at a vibrational level of it, there's a scarcity mentality with it. There's ownership to it. There's the privilege. Everything that when we look, like Trump Towers, let's say that, for example, there's such a negative, we got impeachment going on and all that stuff right now. But you look at something like that, and it's or you go to Venice, and we'll go there, and you see these amazing marble, buildings with and you had people living in grass huts, and then they would spend their whole life and generations to make
in a hut.
Yeah.
Or to make these big
cathedrals and stuff like that. And you see these religious, huge, like you can go to Barcelona and see that amazing. It's sad, really, when you start thinking about it. It makes me really sad. As beautiful as it is, because I like looking at architecture, but then you start thinking of it in this format.
but it's not really beautiful.
It's not.
It's not truly the labor, the intensity of the labor over time to create something very artificial. But even if you create something artificial, it can still share many organic, compounds or shapes or thoughts to it, but it lacks that.
Yeah,
You know?
it's not, and this is what I want us to talk about in our next episode. There's no enhancement to the energy of your life.
No.
There's no ability to be able to make, when you look at a home that you want to live in, you're not looking at it at that level. You're looking at it in,
I'm looking at it in square footage, not round footage,
and how much did I get for the square footage?
not tetrahedron footage.
Yes, no.
It's square footage.
But that has nothing to do, that's such an...
the value's off.
Yeah, I
The
mean,
value
no, think about it.
proposition,
It's
yeah.
like, so, okay, I'm working my ass off to get to the point so that I can afford this 10,000 square foot home.
Mm.
And in the home, I'm going to have, hopefully someday I can make a statue of myself or whatever. I'm just, or,
Yeah, I get
I'm
it.
buying all this art and putting this into this home. For what reason? What does that square foot represent?
What does it represent? It's not even representative of, actually, you want to know something? It's perfectly representative of the conscious idea of how that person thinks or how they represent themselves or how
Yes.
they project themselves to society.
This is where I was hoping you were going.
If I'm in a large square, if that's what I want to acquire, well, that's exactly what I am. I'm inorganic. I'm a person who has attachment to these other material things. Yeah,
So what does the meaning become of it through our society, and then what does it come up to the higher level of consciousness?
Well, then what does that mean to society? That says that society is more focused on the material goods than the things that will break down and disappear, right?
Mhm.
That we'll attach ourselves to and say, this is who we are and we define it this way, rather than the spiritual, etheric, 0 point, all pervasive, superfluid medium of all of these different dimensions that interplay amongst themselves, and the longevity and the endless or infinitude of who we are is not defined in those shapes and what we're building. So what I'm saying is, like, we go out and we project this idea of who we are, and that's very well projected in the unsturdy nature of what we build. If you built a pyramid, it's far more structurally stable in a earthquake
Mhm.
than a regular old skyscraper.
Right.
And that's a square structure.
And
that doesn't that beg the question then, through a parallel? Then the way I think and my ideas, are they truly stable? Are they the best possible non-chaotic way to define who I am? Do they truly match with what the universe wants? No, if anything, you're fighting nature.
yes,
And it
that's where I
crumbles
wanted to
every
get to.
time underneath it.
Every society crumbles.
Every
We're
society.
the longest lasting republic that's been out there, but at some point we will crumble.
Yeah.
And whether it's Louis Vuitton or Ralph Lauren or it's a special home builder or this amazing architect, it doesn't matter.
No.
Because it will crumble. It's not infinite.
No.
Why are the pyramids still one of the best places to go in the world for tourism?
Because they are built with such a structure and idea of longevity, that everlasting rock that they were created out of, that shape,
Right.
that shape alone is an everlasting shape. It is a function of nature.
And even because I want this as we close, I want people to understand this. The shape of a cross,
Oh, the shape of a cross.
which is, correlated with crucifixion, suffering, the worst of the worst. Now it has become that shape
Yeah.
turned into something.
Well, that shape, think about it. That shape turned into cathedrals.
Right.
They laid it sideways, and that's the structure that we're going to put our cathedral in.
And Christianity
Yeah.
is the whole shape of a cross. I mean, every Catholic church you go to, there's Jesus on the cross,
Right.
in the church.
It's a juxtaposition, Jason. It's a blending of two different worlds, right? So it's like, if you look at the Ankh, it's almost like it was borrowed from the Ankh, and it almost did it a disservice. Because at the top of the Egyptian Ankh, right, the Crusada or whatever it's called, it has that circular oval shape.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost like you have that idea of the universe, the circularity of it, right? That perpetual infiniteness of it. And it moves in cycles. And then you have the arms that come out in your plane.
Right.
And then once you go underneath that, you move into the material world, which is that straight line.
But I've seen, but what I'm getting into, whether you look at the Star of David, you look at the cross,
Mm-hmm.
you look at the Pentagon.
Sure.
That's interesting. If anybody really wants to see something with Google Maps, type in Nazi buildings in California,
Yeah.
because there was buildings built that have the swastika, like there was somebody, but the swastika was not.
They used-
Hitler ruined it.
Well, Hitler ruined it. It was on a lot of old firehouses back in the day.
Right,
in the
yeah,
United
but they would
States.
actually build them just like a swastika.
Correct.
So was there someone of a higher conscious looking and saying, let's build a swastika building? Not, Hitler ruined all that,
I
or
understand.
whether we look at the Pentagon.
Just the layout
Right.
alone. Like, people are like, oh, look at the layout of DC. Well, why does it have all these shapes that it lays out to?
33 degrees or whatever and
Right.
all
Well,
that.
I think somebody just had a very fantastic idea of the power of shape.
Mm.
And that's what they were trying to do, not from a negative standpoint, but actually more from a positive one.
But I mean, whether we look at the Star of David or whatever, there's mystic power to shapes.
Sure. And the thought of it, remember, it's two-dimensional form.
Mhm.
So when you think of it in three-dimension, it's carrying a vibrational frequency with it every time you see it.
So every Jew that's out there that looks at the Star of David, every Christian that's out there that looks at the cross,
There's an energy that
and
resonates
then you
from it.
get a collective conscious looking and taking that shape
Precisely.
and giving it power.
That is precisely correct, Jason. Yeah. And I think on our next episode, we'll talk about how you can actually take the practice of using shapes and apply it to your life for a benefit. And they'll just be there benefiting you, and you don't have to do anything with it because they're static in themselves.
Wow, this is a heavy duty episode.
I like that a lot.
No,
But-
I like this one though.
and I think it was important because it brought together a lot of different topics that we've talked about, and you can see the interplay between all of them and how they all are supportive of one another.
But I think as we move forward in our society, and as I believe as we develop to a higher conscious, a higher density,
Yeah.
living that architects, inventors, artists, because
Yes.
they're so important, that they will begin to look at shapes as something that manipulates energy.
Right.
And
And
something that can make the world better, and that the design can be more than just some functional
Yep.
phallus.
yeah, just beyond the physical appearance.
Right. And that if it's going to contain space, how important is that space and what can we do with it?
Correct. Architectural awards should not be on the design itself, but the effect it has beyond the design.
Yes.
And I think that would be.
And that's what we're going to talk about next episode. I want to get into what schools would look like.
Oh yeah, I'd
I
love
want
to
to
do
get
that.
into what our workplace should look like,
What your home should look like.
what your home should look like.
What
and
your
I think-
tattoo should look like.
Yes. Yeah,
Mm.
exactly.
Very cool.
We'll get into all that. Well, thanks, Alex. Appreciate it.
Jason, that was wild. Thank you.